Is there a problem with the current world snooker ranking system? For the past 10 years, the ranking system has been determined on a prize money basis, meaning that the money a player earns in a tournament directly translates to their ranking points, which are accumulated over a 2-year period. In essence, this sounds fairly straightforward and unproblematic. However, the structure of how prize money is broken down, coupled with the wide range of money available in different tournaments that players play in, issues have been highlighted since the concept was introduced, and following the mega prize money available in the Saudi Arabia Masters last week, I do think it's seriously worth debating if this system needs changing. So what I'm about to show is the prize money that was on offer last week in the Saudi Arabian Masters, which does mirror very closely what is offered at the World Championship. This isn't done to criticise that tournament in any way, it's simply the easiest way to demonstrate the issue in hand. If we then compare this to the breakdown of prize money at next week's English Open, the difference is impossible to ignore. If we take the quarterfinals for example, last week's beaten quarterfinalist took home a very handsome £50,000. In contrast, quarterfinalists next week will take home only £13,200, almost a quarter of that amount. And whilst the prize money for the remaining 3 home nations hasn't been announced yet, it's hard to imagine there'll be much, if any, difference compared to the English Open. That would in effect mean that a player could reach 4 quarterfinals in all home nations tournaments and only just make the same amount that a fellow player made in the Saudi Arabia Masters, even if that other player went on to lose first round in all 4 home nations. And the same applies to every single round that you look at. So the question here really is, does the ranking system that is currently in place truly reflect consistency, which, let's face it, should be its job? Now, Judd Trump would be world number 1 regardless of what system we use because of how many titles he has won over the past 2 years. But he is now almost £500,000 ahead of second place, meaning he is really in no danger at all of losing top spot until at least the World Championship comes around next spring. But it's not just a race for the world number 1 spot that is affected here, it's those battling for a top 16 place or trying to keep their tour card by getting into the top 64. It also appears like more tournaments this season will have a tiered system rather than the flat 1-2-8, which on a side point I do think is a really good idea because it allows players lower down the rankings to play against each other in the opening rounds rather than getting hammered by a top player and earning no money whatsoever from that tournament. But a tiered system will also mean players will be trying to get themselves into the top 32 or the top 48 to try and guarantee themselves slightly easier ties in the first rounds. And to do that, it's not so much about being consistent throughout a snooker season, but more about looking at the snooker calendar, identifying which tournaments have the better prize money and aiming to have good runs in those compared to others. Now, if we look at the old system, which was in place all the way up until 2014, that system was based on points. So making it to a certain round would earn you X amount of points. And it was sort of the same principle where the more prestigious tournaments would attract higher ranking points, but the range of points on offer was far lower than what we're seeing now. I couldn't find examples of the old system to show in this video, but I do remember the winner of the World Championship would get 10,000 ranking points and the runner-up would get 8,000. In today's format, the winner gets £500,000 compared to the runner-up getting £200,000, which would be like the runner-up in the old system getting 4,000 points. So they haven't even managed to get the equivalence of the distribution correct. And what all of this ultimately means is a player could be super consistent in 80% of the tournaments that they play in a season. But if it just so happens that the other 20% of tournaments where they lose early are the ones that have greater prize money, they have the risk of someone who hasn't been that consistent picking up better results in that particular tournament and then possibly going above them in the rankings. And it's not only the rankings that are affected, but also the 1-year list, which can impact a player's chance of getting into the Tour Championship or the Players' Championship, those ITV events. So I personally don't see how this system can be judged to be fair, and it may be time for those in charge of the sport to start thinking about changing it.